Hello, and welcome to the Writing with Design session on Paraphrasing Like a Pro. I'm Amber Parks, and I'm so excited to share these strategies with you. So when we think about paraphrasing, it is at the heart of taking someone else's words and making them our own. But it's really hard to explain exactly how to do that. So in this session, we're going to look at number one, the differences between paraphrasing and summarizing, because they are related, but they are not the same thing. And then we're going to explore several of the strategies that we have for paraphrasing. So as the subtitle says, what does it mean to put it into your own words? And are paraphrasing and summarizing the same thing? So we're going to look at, again, the strategies to help students paraphrase like a pro with confidence and with accuracy to make sure that their writing reflects what the original source says, but puts it in their own words. So to begin, I want to take a few moments here to talk about what is paraphrasing and also to see just how much of paraphrasing we have in the world around us. So for example, if we take flour and sugar, eggs and butter, and we mix it up, what does it become? A cake, right? Or cookies, right? Something sweet. But those are the ingredients that we mix up and it becomes a cake. So anytime we're baking or cooking, we are paraphrasing. Let's try another. A fruit platter. What does it become when you take some, you mix it up, you make it look a little different? If you're incredibly talented, you can make an edible arrangement. But again, just the idea of it's laid out in this format as the original, and then we change it and make it our own as the arrangement. How about a pile of laundry? What can we mix that up and make it become? Yes, folded clothes. That's always a wonderful paraphrase when it happens, right? So what we want our children to think about when we say paraphrase is that it's the same stuff, just mixed up differently. So moving on, let's try another one. A piece of ribbon, mix it up. What does it become? A bow. And a pile of damp sand, a sand sculpture. And fruit, veggies, yogurt, and ice, a smoothie. So what's fun about this is when we have the task of paraphrasing an article and putting it into our own words as part of a written assignment or a reading comprehension task, then we can start to talk about, all we're doing is we're making a smoothie out of this. Here's the original and we need to mix it up. So if you can make smoothies, if that's something that your family enjoys, or to fold clothes together and talk about, hey, this is a paraphrase, you're just helping our children realize that paraphrasing is something that happens everywhere, not just for an academic task and not just in the classroom. So I want to switch now and talk about summarizing. And we're going to practice the same set of analogies, but this time with the focus of what a summary does, so that we can understand just how different it is to paraphrase versus to summarize. So when we summarize, we take a cake and we're going to shrink it down. What happens when you shrink a cake? What can it become? A cupcake. A fruit platter. You wouldn't take the whole fruit platter over to your seat. You would take a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, right? And so we say that is akin to having a fruit bowl. All right, a pile of laundry. What could you shrink this down to? Could either be one outfit or a vacuum sealed mess. If you have some of those vacuum storage bags, this is a wonderful demonstration of what a summary is, to see the bag start out giant with so many big fluffy coats or comforters or pillows in it, and then turn on the vacuum and watch all the air come out. And that's really what a summary is. It is a condensed version, right? It is the smallest version. It is the original being shrunk down, right? So that's what we want everyone to think about when they hear the word summary, is to think shortest, most condensed. So let's try a few more. A new cotton shirt that fits just right. A too small cotton shirt. A steak. What would you shrink a steak down to? Jerky. And grapes. What do grapes shrink down to? Raisins. So that takes a quick look at paraphrasing and summarizing and how they are both about the same content in terms of the article or the cake, but then the end goal is very different. So what we're going to do now is move into the 7 strategies. And what's also a reason that paraphrasing and summarizing get confused is that they use a lot of the same strategies to accomplish their end goal. But now that we know how different their end goals are, we realize they are not similar in terms of what their purpose is. So the 7 strategies that we're going to talk through are popping up on the screen for you. The first one is to determine which words are okay. And that's an important one for students to learn, because when we tell our children everything has to be in your own words, then it can really strike a panic in them of, I can't pull anything from the original source. I can't make it sound anything like it. And that simply isn't true. There are a lot of words that are perfectly okay to pull in. And quite honestly, every single word would be fine to pull in as long as it wasn't in the same order. So what we want is to give some parameters of what types of words or words that when they come across them, they say, oh yeah, that's one I can definitely pull in. So we'll talk about which types of words in just a moment, but the way that we indicate them on the text that we're reading on the articles is we highlight them in yellow. The second strategy is to find synonyms or other ways to say words, yes, but I really want to work on the phrases and the entire sentences or sections, because that's where we really start to make an original source come into our own words. And the way that we do this is we put a box around the words or phrases or sentences, and then we brainstorm. We put out in bubbles the different ways that we want to say the phrase or the word. The third is to combine content from across several sentences or paragraphs. And we use green for this, and we underline what is it that we want to combine, and then we write it off somewhere in the white space around the article. 4 is to identify bigger categories of information. This is a little classifying design that we'll do. This one is one that typically we get to later in the reading or the analysis piece, but it is simply a classifying design where you've got 3 different examples of, if we had narwhals and beluga whales and orcas. Right? And I would think, what is the category? What connects those 3 branches? It would be, marine mammals or Arctic whales, right? Something along those lines. That's the bigger category of information. Number 5 is my all-time favorite, and that is selecting a phrase to incorporate as a direct quotation. And if you notice, this one has a little asterisk by it, and that's because this is the only strategy that we don't want students to use when they are summarizing. There is no room for a direct quotation in a summary. Right? Think about the grapes to the raisin. There's no room in a raisin. That's what I like to say to students. There's no room in a raisin for a direct quotation. So the direct quotations are the only strategy out of these 7 that is reserved for paraphrasing. All the other 6 can be used by both. And what we're also going to work on is just pulling in a phrase, not a whole sentence, and certainly not multiple sentences at the initial stage of learning how to do this strategy. But what I love is for students to find a phrase that they can weave into a sentence that has some of their own words as well, so that the original source and their words are just woven together beautifully into a sentence. 6 is to state the inverse of the information, and that is just, we use arrows for that one, and we just see how can we kind of say this in a flipped version. So it's not inaccurate, it's not the opposite, but it's simply like addition to subtraction. It uses all the same numbers, but they're arranged differently to carry out the different operations. But subtraction is not false. It's not the opposite of addition. It's the inverse. It's just flipping and moving numbers and changing the operation. The seventh is to omit information that isn't needed. So this can be based on what the prompt is asking students to write about. They may not need to paraphrase every single sentence or section of the article that they have. And that takes quite a bit of awareness to say, you know what, I can leave that whole section alone. It doesn't have anything to do with what I'm writing about. So these lucky seven strategies are key to really helping students own the process of taking information that is in an original source and making it into their own words. These are in developmental order. So 1 and 2 are the ones that we really want to have students learn first. And then 3 through 7 are kind of there as options. They're certainly in developmental order in terms of how we teach them, but we want students to kind of pick and choose from 3 through 7 as they are reading and working through their paraphrasing task. So we're going to jump into a book called The Eyes of Animals and practice these strategies. Here's our first page. Eagles' large eyes help them hunt. They can see small objects from very far away. They can also see in color. So how can we put this in our own words? Well, first, I'm going to just demonstrate the strategies on this one. So I've highlighted eagles, eyes, and color for our strategy number 1 to determine which words are okay to use directly from the text. And the reason that I highlighted eagles and eyes and color is that when I think about how else could I say these words, I can't really think of another way to say it, right? You think about saying eagles. Well, you could say like birds of prey, but that isn't just for eagles, right? That could be for owls. It could be for hawks, right? So birds of prey is too broad a category. We don't know if that relates. And that is, by the way, strategy 4 of identifying a bigger category, but we don't know about hawks and owls yet. We haven't read about them. So we can't use that strategy yet. So we really need to leave eagles as eagles. There's really no other way to say eagle. What about eyes? Yeah, you can sound kind of strange and say something like the ocular organ, but that isn't helpful. That doesn't clarify. That isn't the goal of what a paraphrase is. And just for the sake of saying it with different words isn't what we want students to think about when they paraphrase. So eyes is another word that's perfectly okay to bring in. And color, right? Not a lot of other ways to say that. So what I'd like you to write out by number 1 as a strategy or as a tip for number 1 is nouns. If you look at eagles and eyes and color, they are all nouns. And a lot of times nouns do not have synonyms. So this is a helpful way of kind of distinguishing, do I need to focus on these words for strategy 1 or focus on it with strategy 2? And nouns are a type of word that most of the time there's not going to be synonyms. So we say, great, highlight them, and you can pull those words into your writing freely and not worry about plagiarizing. So what I also love about that is that it keeps students on task, right? Eagles, eyes, and color is exactly what we're writing about. How do animals see, right? Well, we now know that eagles can see in color just by what we highlighted in yellow. So moving on to strategy 2, we want to find synonyms. We're going to start at the word level. So we'll take the word like large, for example, and you can use resources like thesaurus.com that we've looked at in past sessions and go and just do a quick little bit of research. We aren't looking for 27 synonyms for large. That is not the goal of this. We just want a couple choices so that when we go to write, we aren't using the word large. So a couple choices like huge and grand would be absolutely perfect and all you need. One thing to remember about synonyms is you can't just go to a source like a thesaurus and close your eyes and choose one, because synonyms have to have context. So for example, a synonym for large is going to be monstrous. I would not describe an eagle's eyes as monstrous eyes, right? That just doesn't fit, even though it's a synonym for large. So be careful about the synonym choice. Make sure it fits the context, the topic of what it is that you are writing about. So in this case, when I think about the eagle's eyes, they're huge eyes, they're grand eyes. Both of those capture the idea of large in terms of new words, and then also stay true to what we're talking about. All right, so let's talk about see. They can see small objects from very far away. They can identify, they can view, they can spot, they can perceive. All four of these are synonyms that work for the word see in the context of this sentence. So another example of this would be, looking up synonyms for see and coming across the word look, because it's a synonym. To look means to see. But when I put that into the sentence, it doesn't quite fit, right? They can look small objects from very far away. No, that doesn't fit. What we're talking about when they see small objects is they identify it, they spot it. So our synonym work has actually made the sentence stronger in terms of what it's trying to share about how eagles see things. So now we're going to move a little bit beyond single words into a couple words of small objects. We could say tiny things, things that are far away. We could even say tiny prey. And this brings me to a really important part, especially as students get up in the grades or as students come across topics where they have a lot of background knowledge. We want them to be mindful of, am I paraphrasing just the article? Is that the task? Is that what I am being, graded on? And if it is, then tiny prey would not work, because nowhere in this passage can we figure out that what they see is tiny prey. We can infer that between hunt and small objects, but it isn't purely from the text. So what we also, so if we're only writing about the source, unfortunately, we have to use one of the top two, which isn't as strong. And what I hope most of the time that the task is for students is that they actually are paraphrasing the information, not the article or the book, but the information that they're learning. And that way they can pull in additional sources or pull in their background knowledge. I know that they're hunting small objects, and those small objects are tiny prey, and even specifically mention what those tiny prey are, right? But here's an example of just going online for a moment saying, what are tiny objects or small objects that eagles can see from far away? Literally taking the information from the text as it's written, putting that into a Google search, and here's what popped up as one of the first search results. It's an article from Moment of Science out of Indiana Public Media. And you can see in the very first sentence under that orange box, it says, an eagle circling 300 feet in the air looks to us like a dot in the sky. But even from that height, the eagle is scanning the ground for prey. Then it goes on to kind of explain how the eyes work. So students could potentially find a little bit more if, again, they are allowed to paraphrase information about how eagles see, not just that article. So that's a really important point of clarification. And hopefully most of the time, and what I recommend is that students are able to paraphrase information and be able to pull in additional sources. Because let's face it, we live in information overload, right? You can find a tremendous amount of resources to teach you about any topic you want. So we've got our tiny prey up there as one of our synonyms for small objects. Let's now take a look at the whole phrase of can see small objects from very far away. What does that mean? If an animal can see something very well from far away, how is their eyesight? Well, we could say they have clear eyesight, or one of my favorite words, the word keen. We say they have keen eyesight. And so look for opportunities as you're working on synonym work to really fine tune words that are very specific to the topic at hand. So keen is a word that's specific to describing eyesight or preciseness of something like eyesight. All right, and so we're going to now talk about strategy 3. But before we do that, just to wrap up on 1 and 2, you can see how much heavy lifting is done with strategy 1, which is identifying all the words that are okay to pull directly from the text. It shouldn't be a ton. There should not be 50% yellow highlighted on an article. It really needs to be few and far between, and primarily the nouns, right? And then for strategy 2, about finding synonyms or other ways to say words and phrases and sentences, what I want you to notice is that these phrases like or single words like large and see, and then these phrases like small objects or can see small objects from very far away, they have a lot to do with description. So adjectives and verbs, those are the two parts of speech that always and forever, students can look for synonyms. There are so many other ways to say descriptions, both in the adjective form and then giving really precise verbs, that we really, really want students to focus in on those and then branch out from just the adjectives and verbs like large and see into phrases that contain those types of words as well. So we've got clear eyesight, we've got keen eyesight as our two ways to say that long phrase. And so moving up into now strategy 3, we've got eagles, see, and color. And strategy 3 is combining content from several sentences or paragraphs. Now, in this case, we only have 3 sentences so far. We're just at the beginning of this book, but it's the only little section on eagles. So we just want to see, can we take a little bit from this section and a little bit from this one and a little bit from this one and put it into our own sentence? So here are the 3 words: eagles, see, colors. And that basically makes a sentence, right? It actually makes what's in the bottom sentence, if we want to get really technical, but we're just practicing the skill of, can you take this word, can you take this word, can you take this word, and kind of mix it up into your own way of putting it together. And I do want to remind you of all of the synonym work that we did on see. So we want, obviously, as much of the wording changed. Eagles and color were 2 of the yellows. We need a new verb, and then we can also add in other words. So strategy 3, just by its nature, is going to make us paraphrase based on what we've done with strategies 1 and 2. So just to kind of share the developmental order, by walking through 1, 2, and then into 3, you're going to come up with a fantastic paraphrase. So eagles see colors. We could say it differently as eagles perceive the world in color. Or how about the world is perceived in color by eagles, right? We can kind of reverse the structure of the sentence once we kind of get that initial version out. All right, so with all of this, strategies 1, 2, and 3, we're going to now work on paraphrasing. So we're going to pull from all of the yellow highlights, we're going to pull from all of the orange brainstorms, and we're going to pull from the green combining strategy. And as you see at the bottom with the paraphrase content, we have a fantastic paraphrase that arguably is stronger than the original text. Since they have keen eyesight and perceive the world in color, eagles can quickly spot tiny prey to catch. All right, page 2. Bees have 5 eyes. Their 2 large eyes are made up of thousands of tiny eyes. They also have 3 small eyes that help them tell how bright or dark things are. So let's talk through strategy 1. You probably are seeing some of these, but there's a new type of word that's popping up, and that's numbers. So the other hint for strategy 1 is nouns, as you already have, and numbers. So because there's really no other way to say 5. And in that case, we could highlight thousands as well on this, because I can't really think of another way to say thousands. I could replace 5 with many, and I could also replace thousands with the word many. And that lack of preciseness is not something that we want in a paraphrase. Paraphrases are supposed to help clarify and help kind of make concepts easier to understand. And changing out 5 to many doesn't really help me. And then let's talk about strategy 2 for just a moment. So we know this one already. We can change it out, like giant, for example, is different on this one. Monstrous might actually fit for it be, or creepy though, but just getting other words than just large is the goal, right? That fit for the context. And in this case, we're now talking about a bee. Made up of. So now here's a little verb phrase. How else could we say made up of? Well, we could say created by, consist of, composed of. So always be looking to get beyond that 1 word level synonym work. We can take this whole sentence. Speaking of getting beyond the 1 word level, their 2 large eyes are made up of thousands of tiny eyes. Does anybody know what the scientific name is for eyes that are made up of thousands of little eyes? A lot of insects have them. They're also a type of word and a type of sentence. compound eyes, right? So we can take that entire sentence and we can shrink it down to compound eyes. Here's another single word though, as we're just going through: tiny, minute, and little, for another way to say small. And then we've got this nice long phrase: help them tell how bright or dark things are. If the bee's eyes help them tell how bright or dark things are, what can we say about the bee's eyes? Say something like they are light sensing, right? They can sense how much light there is. And now I want to skip over strategy 3. We've practiced that one. We're going to not do 4 as well, because again, we don't have bigger categories yet. We've switched from birds now to an insect. But where I want to go is strategy 5, which is selecting the phrases to incorporate as direct quotations. And you'll see here that we just highlight that in pink. And I really, really like the phrase made up of thousands of tiny eyes. Now, we already did synonym work on this, right? We came up with that it can say compound eyes, but what I like is that it really defines what a compound eye is. And I don't think I can say it any better. And that's really the goal that we want for students to think about, is for them to say, can I say this phrase any better than the author did? And if they can't, then we want them to consider that as the direct quotation. Notice though that it's just a phrase. We're not going to pull in the whole sentence. We just want students to find a phrase that they can pull into their writing. And so from here, we've now got a fantastic paraphrase that pulls from the yellow, pulls from the orange, and now incorporates that direct quotation. And as I read it, I want you to see if you can hear where that direct quotation comes in, made up of thousands of tiny eyes. Does it stand out? Do you feel like you can tell that as I'm reading it out loud? Bees see with 2 giant compound eyes, each made up of thousands of tiny eyes, and 3 light sensing eyes. Can you hear it? Can you tell? You can't. And that's the beauty of weaving in part of the original source into your writing in a way that isn't the whole sentence that can sometimes kind of stick out like a sore thumb. So by weaving in just a phrase, it helps the writing just to have this beautiful flow to it. And students are showing, I read the source, I found some great pieces of original writing that I want to incorporate in. So all the students have to do is put quotation marks around it, as you see in the paraphrase content at the bottom. There's the quotation marks in front of the word made, and then there's quotation marks at the end of eyes. And that's step 1. Always and forever, students have to put quotation marks around the original source words, and then just a simple way of citing. And if you look at the bottom before the period, you'll see that we have parentheses, page 3, parentheses. And so that's all students need to do. They could put paragraph number, they could put page number. You don't have to get into any technical citation until high school age, and that's something that English teachers will certainly help students learn how to do. We just want them to be in the habit of pulling in a direct quotation with quotation marks and then giving some sort of citation. Just the page number or paragraph number is an easy and very accessible way for all students to start. So that way, if students are in 2nd grade or in 12th grade, they can pull in a direct quotation and feel confident that it's cited well, and also make it easy enough that they can do it. All right, snakes. We're going to talk about our final strategies on this page. Snakes' eyes are on the sides of their heads. They can only see things well up close. So you know the drill. We're going to start with strategies 1 and 2. Which words are okay? Well, snakes, eyes, heads. I think that about covers it. What about synonyms? Take a look through here. What words could we pull in as synonyms? On the sides is sticking out for me. On the sides, we could say both sides, each side. And then if we use the illustration, excuse me, not the illustration, but the photograph of our snake, we can notice that their eyes are on above their mouths. So that really changes it. And it is synonymous in terms of sharing where their eyes are located, but it's very different from what we see in the text. It's coming from the picture support. To the right and left of their nostrils, same kind of thing. Super fascinating way of describing where their eyes are, but not the same as on the sides. All right, C, we know we've got lots of ways to say that. As long as it fits for the context, we can use the same ones, the same bank of choices. And then things as well, objects, prey, and predators. Again, if we are true to this article as our paraphrase source, we can only say things like objects or items. But if it is paraphrasing the information, if we can do a little additional research about snakes or pull in more background knowledge, then prey and predators fits perfectly, because let's face it, that is what they are always on the hunt for, right? And then see things well, clearly, and then remember my favorite word, keenly. Yes, so that now we've got the adverb phrase of it, or version of it. And then up close. What's another way of saying up close? If something's up close to you, it is nearby, it is near, it is right by. And then what I want to do is practice the inverse. I want to move down to strategy 6 to state the inverse of information. So they can only see things well up close. And the way that we work on our inverse, which we use a little purple arrow for, is to phrase it as an if-then statement. If they can only see things well up close, then what does that mean? What's the flipped version? So the flipped version of up close would be far away. So what does that mean about seeing things far away? Then they cannot see far away, or they cannot see well far away. So we're saying the same essence of information. We're just flipping the structure, flipping the focus of the way that we're sharing it. Stating the opposite would be something like snakes cannot see things well up close, right? That's the opposite. And that's incorrect. It's inaccurate information. So we're not stating an opposite, we're stating an inverse. If we're focusing on seeing up close, then let's change the focus to seeing far away. That's just the flip of where things might be located, the inverse of where they might be located. And so now we're going to think about, if things are far away, does their vision change? And yes, for the snakes, it does. So here we've got paraphrase content. Snakes cannot see far away, only objects that are near them. Their eyes are located above their mouths. So you're seeing how we're pulling from all of the different brainstorming designs, from the yellow highlighted words, as well as the other strategy, and in this case, the inverse strategy, to come up with our paraphrase sentences. I want to take just a moment to practice stating the inverse a couple more times, because when you see numbers, it's a really great way of thinking about stating the inverse. And the snake one didn't have that. That was the if-then statement setup that we like to use. But let's just see in terms of this one. So if we take the first one, 30% of boys at school prefer basketball to soccer. Okay, then what's the inverse of that? What can we infer now is the flipped version? Well, 70% of boys at school prefer soccer over basketball. So we're taking the two choices here and we're just getting the rest of the percentage, right? If 30 liked this, then 70 liked that. So let's try this one for all the lefties in the world. 90% of the world's population is right-handed. So what does that mean about us lefties? Yeah. There's only 10% of us, right? But just again, kind of looking at how something is stated and seeing if we can flip it, right? If we can state the inverse. So as we finish up looking at the strategies, before we kind of look at what else is in this resource for you, I just want to remind you that, we are talking through specific strategies for writing, for paraphrasing in this particular essence or session, excuse me, because we don't want to give students a blank sheet of paper, right? Ever, and the directions right, because you would never hear a math teacher just say, hey, why don't you get out a sheet of paper and I want you just to math, right? You can math about anything you want, just math. Or science, right? Students would never just get chemicals and Bunsen burner, for example, and the directions science, right? Just get in there, science, figure it out, right? There's a process, there are procedures, there are math problems, there are steps and structures that are given to students to be able to know what to do. And so we've just talked through several of the strategies for paraphrasing that are going to help students know what to do and not just be given a blank sheet of paper and the directions paraphrase, right? Put it in your own words. So I want to encourage you to always think about these strategies as a way to make the task of paraphrasing a whole lot less intimidating. So what's left in here is for you all to continue to practice on these strategies. You have page after page of animals. We've got sea stars, we've got macaws, we've got tigers. So all kinds of animals are in here for you to practice these strategies with these short pieces of text, right? And the goal, again, with this is to get these strategies to be something that our children just know. They've got them down, they know the colors we use, and that they can tackle any article that they are asked to read and be able to pull in information in their own words and make it sound absolutely beautiful. So as always, I'm available by email if you've got any questions, but I certainly look forward to hearing from you and seeing how this paraphrasing work goes. And one thing I didn't mention as I was just going through the slides really quickly is that you will come across several different types of birds in the book. And so that is where we demonstrate strategy for the bigger categories. So you saw the macaw page. There is also one about owls. So once students have read about the different birds, then you can circle back to strategy 4 and say, hey, is there a bigger category here? Can we say something about the way birds see and bring that into the paraphrase? All right, happy writing. Thank you so much for joining.